You are listening to the Nightline Sports Network, brought to you by Travis Dever and the Dever Team, 386-690-1636.
Welcome to the AAC Report, only on the Nightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Thanks so much for listening. Coming up on today's show, we continue our team-by-team previews. The Temple Owls, we'll discuss them with Ryan Wallen of Owls247. And USF, we'll chat with Will Turner from Bulls247. They are standing by in the virtual green room and join us in just a few moments. Meanwhile, UCF has agreed to host the Hula Bowl, one of college football's premier all-star games. That will be at Bounce House Stadium coming up in 2022. That game will take place on January 15th. The pending approval was supposed to be at today's UCF Board of Trustees meeting, but that has now been delayed. But therefore, though, the deal is expected to be signed off upon. The Hula Bowl, of course, a long-standing Hawaiian tradition, typically takes place at Aloha Stadium, but the 26-year-old facility is currently closed for repair and upgrades, and therefore the game will come to Orlando and be part an increase for the athletic department's budget. $50,000 will go to the UCF Athletic Association, and they get the parking, food, and beverage, and all that good stuff that goes along with it. So the Hula Bowl to be played in Florida at UCF. All right, team-by-team preview coming up next with the Temple Owls. Ryan Wallen of Owls247 joins us next.
Hey, this is Travis Dever, Kai's Real Estate, the Dever Team, New Smyrna Beach. Your source for real estate and everything else, New Smyrna Beach. Proud sponsor of Nightline. Call me anytime at 386-690-1636. That's 386-690-1636. Let me show you my hometown, New Smyrna Beach, UCF's favorite beach. Go Knights and charge on.
An auto accident can change your life forever. At Chad Barr Law, we are raising the bar on what to expect from your personal injury attorney. Hi, I'm Chad Barr, and I want you to know that our entire team is dedicated to providing you with the representation you deserve in your greatest time of need. If you or a loved one have been injured in an auto accident, call 407-599-9036 for a free consultation or visit chadbarlaw.com. At Chad Barr Law, our clients come to us in need and leave as family. Offices, Altamont Springs.
Looking for more out of your Porsche? Look no further than Flat6Motorsports.com. They have the widest selection of aftermarket Porsche parts anywhere in the world. With over 85 product lines and in-depth expertise, Flat6Motorsports.com is your one-stop shop for any Porsche performance needs. Whether you're shopping for intakes, exhausts, suspension, or tuning, they have you covered. Flat6Motorsports.com is the premier Porsche aftermarket specialist. Check them out at Flat6Motorsports.com.
All right, we continue our team-by-team previews. Going to talk about the Temple Owls now. We are joined by Ryan Wallen of Owls247. Ryan, great to have you back on the show once again.
Of course, Jeff. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, and it's always great to be talking about football once again, right?
Of course, 3 weeks away. I can't wait.
Yeah, most definitely. And first, let's get you, give us some recollection, although you might have tried to wash it from your mind, of the 2020 season. COVID obviously impacted a lot of teams. Temple certainly one of the most affected by that, with a 1-6 campaign in 2020. Give me your thoughts on the past season.
You know, last season was obviously there should be an asterisk next to a lot of teams' seasons last year, because COVID obviously played a huge part in the outcome of some teams' seasons, but Temple especially, because it started from the get-go in September or August, when they were not allowed to practice fully during the training camp due to city restrictions in Philadelphia, not allowing a certain amount of players out on the field at a time, those large gatherings. So it affected them pretty heavily right from the get-go. And then they had their complete non-conference slate wiped, canceled from them. So they didn't actually get to open the season till I believe it was the first week of October. So it was a complete mess from the beginning. They had a lot of outbreaks week in and week out. That you heard that Temple was only dressing like 50 scholarship players, 40 scholarship players, and it just seemed to get worse as the season went on. And then you had injuries. You had some players opt out during the season. Players decided that they didn't want to play. So by the end of the season, that last game against ECU in Philadelphia, which I thought was a little poetic in a way, where they have a player that supposedly tests positive as they're warming up on the field, puts the whole game status in doubt. They end up playing the game against ECU, and then they get manhandled by a team that they had dominated in recent memory since both teams had joined the Americans. So it was quite an interesting campaign. Like you mentioned, they ended 1-6. They were lucky to get the win at USF even in that second week of the season. But they return players that the ones that did decide to come back and did not enter into the transfer portal, they believe that this is the year that they can bounce back, rebuild a little bit, return to that Temple tough mentality. Whereas the ones that did decide to leave, they are going to see some of those guys on their regular season slate this year in Rutgers and Boston College. And I know some of the players that are still on Temple are really looking forward to that because they want to show them that the grass wasn't always greener on the other side.
Well, last year, obviously, when you can't play and you can't play consistently, it's just hard to get out of the mud and get going. And then, it led to a lot of instability at the quarterback position. 6 guys threw passes last year. So, when you have that many guys rotating at the quarterback position, it's just hard to get going. So now Anthony Russo's on to Michigan State. Trad Beatty's off to Georgia Tech. You got DeJuan Mathis coming in. Who's going to be under center to start the season for Temple?
Well, thankfully, that's one of the sure things that we do know as of right now, pending injury. Carey had head coach Rod Carey actually announced at the end of spring ball that DeJuan Mathis had won the starting job over Ray-Al Mitchell, who was a transfer from Iowa State a season ago. He did see some game action last year, but he also got injured, missed the latter portion of the season. He was one of those 6 quarterbacks that you mentioned that threw a pass and saw some game action last year for Temple. But Mathis won the job just like he did at Georgia last year as a redshirt freshman. We've not seen him in person yet, but what we see in videos on Twitter and all, dude looks legit. He's got a cannon for an arm. What Carey has said that is his biggest strength is his athleticism. I mean, he's every bit of the 4-star recruit that Georgia thought he was, and Carey believes he's going to be that at Temple, especially playing against some lower level competition. I think maybe this was just the case of the SEC might have been just too big for him. But he was also young, and he just got beat out by a better player down at Georgia, and that's why he decided to transfer, because he knew he wasn't going to play. So, Carey was lucky to get him out of the portal. They said they went right after him as soon as they saw his name in there. He comes in. He looks like he's going to be the guy, pending any injuries. But Carey did say that his decision-making is something that he does still need to improve upon. And that's been the trend for Temple quarterbacks, the last probably 4 or 5 seasons now, going back to even the Jeff Collins era. Temple hasn't had a solid quarterback that has made good decisions. We talk about how great Anthony Russo was, and he was a very good quarterback for Temple. But at times, he made some very costly mistakes, threw some very bad balls, turned the ball over in key moments for Temple that ultimately cost them some games. And you can see that even dated back to Frank Newtile when he was the quarterback, Logan Marchie. The last real stable quarterback Temple had was P.J. Walker in that 2016 campaign in which the Owls won the AAC title.
And, of course, the running game, Raymond Davis is left for Vanderbilt, and I've always thought of him as one of the most talented backs in the conference. Who's going to be toting the rock in the backfield?
I agree. And, Davis was one that was just an odd situation last year. I won't get into it too much because we don't really know what happened. There was just a disagreement between him and coaching staff at some point, and I guess he felt that it was time for him to leave. So he did. Again, I don't know if he's going to find greener pastures at Vanderbilt, because Vanderbilt's pretty crap, put it politely. But, he's had some nice runs in the spring game and Twitter that I saw on Twitter from him. So wish the best for Ray Davis. Good guy. Just wasn't a fit at Temple. But, replacing him, we have Tavon Ruley coming back. He actually got injured again towards the end of last season. I believe it was that second to last game he got injured in. He was their second leading rusher last year with just over 300 yards. So he'll be back this year. I assume he probably is the starter at the beginning of the season, just because he's the veteran presence. He's the oldest guy in the group. But behind him, you got a transfer out of Illinois and Rayvon Bonner, who has a lot of game experience in the Big Ten, and he was a solid player. I know he had double-digit touchdowns in the Big Ten for his career. He's a solid power back. So I heard Temple really likes him, what he's doing, and he brings that experience and veteran presence to the room too. And then you also have a Florida transfer, Iverson Clement, who they're going to use both as a running back and a slot receiver. He's another 4-star kid that just didn't get a lot of playing time down in the SEC. Local Jersey kid that Temple really tried to get on, but was a little too good for their capabilities in recruiting him. But found his way back home, and they like what he brings to the table, and that he can be a very versatile player, offensive weapon. And then a young guy that I would keep an eye on is Edward Sadie. Rod Carey said that he's had a really good spring so far in camp. He's had a really good camp so far. He's really turning heads, and he's another young Philly kid. Quick guy, but he's put on some muscle, I hear. So he looks like he could be maybe not the guy this year, but maybe the guy of the future.
As far as the guys going to be catching the football, you got 4 of the top 5 targets coming back, it looks like. So tell us about that position.
Yeah, of course. So probably the receiving group is, out of the skill positions, the strongest for returning. Like you mentioned, you have Jaden Blue coming back, who has been the team's leading receiver the past 2 seasons, first 1,000-yard receiver in school history, always a weapon out of the slot. You have Randall Jones coming back, who's a speed guy on the outside who can just stretch the field, really opens up the offense for them. And then you also have Jose Barbone and David Martin Robinson coming back as well. Both look like they're going to be more incorporated into the offense this year. I know Temple likes to use that tight end as a blocker, but last year we saw them start to use that position as a weapon, and they used to send him out of the backfield on routes like these fake block schemes where they just find him wide open down the field. He actually had one of the highest receiving totals for a tight end in the past decade for Temple. So 147 yards might not look like a lot for a tight end, but for Temple tight ends, that's a decent amount. So they're definitely excited about what Martin Robinson brings to the table. Barbone, again, a young guy, but he's pretty solid on this outside, really good hands. And just some of the younger guys to mention, I know Devin Fox has had a really good camp as well. I believe Kerry mentioned him in his press conference yesterday, that Fox has really shown out and he's really improved this season. So he's going to be a young guy to watch for.
And if you look at the offensive line, you could say, that's one of the strengths of the team coming back this season as well. With, I believe you got 4 starters coming back there as well. And the 6 quarterbacks cannot complain about the pass protection because they only average a league low 1.7 a game. So that's definitely something, they got the wall to start with.
Yeah, and, that's a testament, to the offensive line first and foremost. Like you mentioned, 4 starters returning. I crunched the numbers earlier this offseason, actually, and between the projected 5 starters, they have 114 starts at the D1 level. Now, not all of those are at Temple, but they all have come at the D1 level. So you can't buy experience, and that's what you have right there along the O-line. They're really, really solid there, and I would venture to say probably the most experienced O-line in the conference, if not one of the best in the country in terms of those numbers. So definitely that. And like you said, I think the sack totals last year were a testament just to also how Temple's starting to implement this offensive, trying to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quicker. They knew last year that they had to go into the game situations with a lot of inexperienced quarterbacks. And they tried to cater the offense to that. So they were trying to get the ball out quicker. Maybe not necessarily was the best in some cases because Temple got manhandled offensively, especially in that latter half of the season after Russo went out with his injury. But, it shows that Temple was at least trying to work with what they had, trying not to throw these young quarterbacks to the fire. But the O-line, they did their job, like you mentioned, 1.6 sacks per game for the season, which really incredible. Testament to the O-line, testament to O-line coach Joe Tripodi. Done a really good job there in Temple's over the past, 5-10 years, dating back to even Matt Rule. They've done a really good job at developing an offensive line talent.
Now, I guess the defensive line probably wishes they had that stability coming back because there's a lot of losses there with transfers and graduation. So that's going to be a work in progress, I would presume.
I agree, and that's probably my biggest concern heading into the season. That was one of my biggest concerns coming out of last season. You have guys like Arnold Ebiketie, who was a productive guy, transfers out, goes to Penn State. Now is looking like he could be a top 3-round draft pick if he produces at Penn State pretty well. Ifeanyi Maije, who was all-league defensive tackle 2 seasons ago, transfers to Rutgers. He's one of the guys that, Temple really wants to play this year because he had that mentality that, going to Greg Schiano's Rutgers team is going to be a greener pasture, but he actually just unfortunately suffered an injury, I heard. So he might be out for that game or for a little longer than expected. But like you mentioned, it's just hard to replace that sort of production and talent that Temple had there. They had Dan Archibong, who was a 3-year starter at D tackle as well, alongside Maije. You had guys like, name's escaping me, but going back to it, they have guys like Manny Walker returning, who did get incorporated into this system last year a little bit, is an experienced guy, played at Wake Forest. He got a couple sacks last year. They went out to the transfer portal and they knew they had to hit the portal hard, especially along the D line, because they're just very young there right now, especially at the D tackle position. So they went out and got a pair of transfers from North Carolina and Zach Gill and Lancine Toure, both of which, again, a little unproven down at the ACC level, but could come in and provide an immediate impact there, a little bit of a veteran presence, a little bit more size for the Owls. Unfortunately, Gill is injured and he might miss the start of the season due to an injury he suffered in spring ball. Toure also was injured during spring ball, but he's coming back. Kerry did say he is able to be practicing now, so Owls are hopeful he'll get back. And then hopefully lining up on the other side of Walker this season is going to be Will Rogers, who's a transfer from Washington State, who, again, really productive guy at the Pac-12 level. They really like him. I mean, he's a guy that produced double-digit sacks in the Pac-12, and that's not an easy feat to have. So, you expect, if you're saying and you're taking this Power 5, G5 thing, you would think with him maybe transferring down to the G5 that he would put up even better numbers at that level. So Owls are hopeful that he's going to be a real threat on the outside coming off the edge this year.
And of course, in the middle of the defense, the linebacking core, give us your prognosis on that position.
The linebacking core is a big question mark, I think, is the best way to put it right now. The defensive line is the struggle, the area of focus that I worry about. The linebackers, they had their moments last year where they were very good, and they had their moments last year where they were very little suspect. They do have a veteran guy in the middle in Will Kwanku, who's coming back, who should be the starting middle linebacker there for the Owls. Productive guy. He's the longest tenured Owl, I believe, on the roster right now. He was on their bowl team in 2017 from the Gasparilla Bowl, played in that game. So he brings that veteran presence. He was the leading tackler last year for the Owls with 49 tackles, forced a fumble as well. So he's that kind of that anchor. And then right now, I believe that it's George Reed at the other linebacker position, and then Jordan McGee at the other backer position. So two guys that are a little young on the younger side. Reed, I believe, is a redshirt junior this year. 24 tackles last year, did have a sack, but a guy that had his moments, and he's going to be challenged for that starting spot, because I know there's a young guy behind him who was a true freshman last year, and Kobe Wilson, who really came on at the end of last year, played really well in that ECU game, given the chance that he got to play in that game. And Kerry said that they're pretty much neck and neck right now. So Reed has very little room for error there, or else I suspect a true sophomore in Wilson could be starting midway through the season. And then, like I said, McGee is another guy who's young, was, I believe, a true freshman last year. Saw a lot of game action, 15 tackles on the season. Pretty good speed, pretty good size. Again, just a little bit of inexperience there. And I look back on this linebacking core sort of as the linebacking core Temple had to start that 2017 campaign as the Owls went to Notre Dame. They got absolutely destroyed in that game. Jeff Collins' first game as head coach, but they learned from it. You had guys in that linebacking core that were Chappelle Russell, who just won a Super Bowl with the Buccaneers. You had a guy named Sean Bradley, who is now on the Eagles special teams. And you had another guy, I think, that I believe found his way into NFL camp somewhere, but don't think he made a roster. But you had guys that developed over the course of their careers at Temple and proved that they could play at the NFL level. So I think this is very similar to that.
And then in the secondary, you got a couple of starting corners transferring out, but you got corners transferring in. And then, of course, at the safety position, a little stability there with Amir Tyler and Jalen Ware. How do you assess the secondary?
Yeah, and Amir Tyler's kind of been the spokesperson. You know, I mentioned earlier about that there were guys on the team that chose to stay at Temple, and Amir Tyler was sort of the one leading that charge for the Owls that did stay and said, you know, just because we had a bad year, I didn't want to give up. I wanted to be part of the rebuild here at Temple and show that we were better than the product we put on the field last year. So he's been that guy that's been the spearheading of that. He's the leader of the defense. I would expect he probably earns a single digit. He did as a single digit already, but he's a single digit guy, which means he's one of the toughest guys on the team. He's well respected by his teammates. Where I do worry is the corner position, like you mentioned. Losing Christian Braswell, who was, again, a single-digit guy on the outside, to Rutgers again, really hurts. He was probably capable of being all-conference caliber player. Was the team's leading interception getter last year, even though it was only with one. Really good coverage guy. He was not afraid to challenge a guy, who was 4 or 5 inches taller than him, had really good timing on the ball. You lose him, but then you get a guy coming in like a Keyshawn Paul and a Cameron Ruiz, both coming from UConn and Northwestern respectively. Ruiz is a guy who Kerry's already mentioned has really stood out, even though he just got into camp the last few weeks. He was not an early enrollee as a transfer, so he's really stood out already. So I expect him probably to start. On the other side, I expect a veteran guy like Freddie Johnson probably to start at the season. Maybe Keyshawn Paul gets the slot job. But again, Paul was a very solid corner at UConn. You tend to not think of UConn players producing very good defensive players, especially one that's been there the last couple of years for them. But, he's a guy that actually put up numbers if you look at that. So definitely a good productivity there. Ruiz, again, solid productivity in the Big Ten, really competed, played well, probably his best game against Purdue and another Temple transfer, Ahmad Anderson. If you watch the game between them two from, I believe, 2 years ago, they really just went at it. I believe Ruiz had a pick in that game, but Anderson also had a touchdown in that game. So just seeing those two battle, and now they're on the same team, it's really fun to see. And you see that bright future for Temple, hopefully, and those guys.
And of course, Coach Rod Carey, 8 wins in his first season at the helm. And then, last year obviously is what it was. So I presume they're just going to flush last year and try to build upon what they did 2 years ago, more or less.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like I said, I think last season, due to the situation that Temple was facing themselves with COVID, city restrictions, the season, how the scholarship numbers were playing out week to week with how many people were able to dress for the Owls, I think admin was very understanding of the fact that Rod was dealt a losing hand and there wasn't really anything he could do about it. And he admitted himself at the end of the season, COVID won. No matter what they tried, COVID beat them. And they know that this year they're not going to be necessarily facing those same circumstances. That he actually took the team up to the Bronx to have camp up at SUNY Maritime to try and, bond the team together more, reconnect them. Some of the single digit guys who were up there were interviewed yesterday and said, this is what we need. We know that last year we spent a lot of time isolated and alone, and we didn't get to see each other in practice like we needed to. But now this is a reconnecting, trying to bring that atmosphere and that Temple tough mentality back. And Carey's fully aware of that. I would say, though, if there's a losing season on the board, given all the transfers, all the departures, all that fun stuff, I would say, there's going to be some very unhappy fans, or were after last year, even given all the circumstances. And you might start seeing some board members get a little upset with, is this our guy? He was brought in to win. He produced in Northern with a lot less talent than what he has now. And he's just not performing. So I don't know necessarily if he's on the hot seat after this season, if there's a losing record, but I think there's got to be some changes made at some point. If that's the case, probably look at your weakness on either the offensive defensive side of the ball, if that's the case, and maybe do a coordinator switch.
So where do you think they land record wise in this campaign?
Now, I will say that when I did see the coaches poll at the beginning of the preseason poll, I did not think they were the 10th best team in the conference. I think they're probably sitting around that 7, 6, 7, 8 mark. I think they're going to surprise people. I think Dwan Mathis actually will be able to carry this offense, and they have enough skill position and players on offense that can carry the load as long as Mathis makes good decisions. Like you said, the offensive line is going to be the one that really needs to step up and, again, have a great season like last year, do a good job in protecting their young quarterback, presumably a guy you want there for the next 3-4 years. So I really expect that their offense will be able to keep up. The defense is what I do worry about this year. Hopefully that they will see some of these younger guys step up. These transfers will make an impact early on, and they'll be able to steal some wins. I look at their schedule. Rutgers, I think, is going to be a dogfight. Schiano has turned that program around. That's not a gimme win as it was when you saw Temple schedule that a couple years back. But that's a rivalry game. That's a recruiting rivalry. So that game's going to go far in, determining recruiting for the next couple years, maybe recruiting this year for this recruiting class. Then you get Akron after that. I expect Temple to win that. If not, then they're really in some trouble. So possibly a 2-0 start before you go to Boston or have Boston College come down, probably lose that one. I would hope, again, you beat Wagner. So I would hope 3-1, 2-2 to start the season. And then you get into some of these tough games in conference. And I know Temple's end of the season isn't as bad as their start to the conference slate. So you might see them fall a little below 500 there, opening with Memphis in the conference, and then Cincinnati. Obviously, they're going to be a top 10 team, you assume, at that point in the season. So that probably will be a loss. But then you have USF, UCF, Again, probably a loss to UCF. I know UCF fans will like that. Hopefully competitive than the last couple times, though. Temple and the Knights have got together. But then you close with East Carolina, Houston, Tulsa, Navy. I expect you could steal a couple games there, probably 2 or 3. So I don't think they're the best team. They're not going to win the conference this year, but I see middle of the pack, hopefully around 500, if not bowl eligible, 6-6, 7-5.
All right, Ryan. Well, before we let you go, please shameless plugs for your coverage of the Temple Owls.
Of course, you can always follow me on Twitter at Ryan Wallen 247. You can always visit our site at owlsdaily.com or temple.247sports.com. And you can follow our Owls Daily Twitter accounts at owlsdaily247 or at Temple Owls Daily.
All right, Ryan. Thanks as always. As always, outstanding work, and we will look forward to speaking to you again down the road.
Of course. Thanks, Jeff, for having me on. Appreciate it.
And we'll be right back to preview the USF Bulls next when the AAC Report continues right after this.
If you haven't figured it out yet, I love Tijuana Flats. I would love them even if they weren't a partner with us on the Nightline Sports Network. They have all kinds of great Tex-Mex food, and it's fresh, by the way. Made to order burritos, tacos, enchiladas, chimichangas, quesadillas, bowls, nachos, and taco salads. And if you haven't tried the queso, you are completely missing out. It is the best queso that I've ever had in my life. Absolutely hands down. And the sauce bar that they have, everything from wild to mild in there. Absolutely awesome, awesome stuff. Not only do I love the food at Tijuana Flats, but I love the company, a UCF-born company. And they give back to the community with the Justin Queso Foundation. So head to your local Tijuana Flats. Tex-Mex for everyone. Hey Jeep Wrangler owners, have you ever sat in your office at work and watched the rain just pour into your Jeep because the weatherman said that there was a 0 chance of rain? Or you put your doors back on because there was a 100% chance and then not a drop of rain fell? Well, there's a company out there that can help take the worry away and give you the peace of mind to be without your doors. The company's called Life Without Doors. They make waterproof rain curtains and dash covers for Wranglers. Life Without Doors is there to help make the decision to leave the doors at home an easy one. Find out more at lifewithoutdoors.com.
Spice up your company with homemade marketing services from Tasty Gravy Creative. Tasty Gravy serves up a menu of budget-friendly marketing, graphic design, and public relations services customized to your specific goals. Co-owned by a UCF graduate, Tasty Gravy can help refresh your brand, strengthen your online presence, or reinforce your company's message. Contact Tasty Gravy for help with your website, social media, marketing, advertising materials, and more. Visit tastygravy.com.
All right, we turn our attention now to USF as we continue our team-by-team previews on the AAC Report. And joining us now from Bulls 24/7 is Will Turner to talk about South Florida and the 2021 season. Will, thanks for being back on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Always appreciate you having me on, Jeff.
Well, let's talk about last season first. It was the opening campaign for new head coach Jeff Scott, and clearly it was a season where he needed to clean house and start to establish his culture. 1-8, the record, but I think much more than that is being talked about as far as his tenure goes so far. Give me your assessment of Jeff Scott.
Yeah, so far it's been it's a little hard to make any true judgment just simply because of 2020 being a COVID year. Obviously, that every team in the country had to deal with that in their own separate ways. And Jeff Scott certainly had a challenge not having a spring or even a full summer of off-season conditioning. So there were a lot of guys that had been recruited by Strong and guys that Jeff wasn't really familiar with, and really only got a chance to have a handful of incoming freshmen and some transfers that had game experience, with or had been recruited by Jeff Scott, or that even had game experience. So there were a lot of new faces around the program, and it's hard to judge a head coach considering by the end of last season they really only had 59 to 70 players suit up for that UCF game to round out the season, but there were some bright spots. When you look at some of the things that they did offensively, giving Memphis a scare in the Liberty Bowl. They were up 27 to 13 at halftime at that point. Before losing that one by one, they had a lead on Annapolis at one point. Late in that one, and they gave UCF a scare, obviously, kind of late in that one as well. And there's some good things they did defensively too. You look at the Cincinnati game up in Cincinnati. I mean, that's a 14-0 game at halftime, and really a 7-0 game before the final 39 seconds of that one. So there were some good things to take away. It's just hard to judge a head coach based on a year where he really wasn't playing with a full deck of cards week in and week out. And it's really hard to make a judgment and make an assessment. But there were definitely some bright spots and things that going into the off season they knew that they were going to have to work on.
Well, of course, a lot of the attention is at the quarterback position. Jordan McLeod has transferred to Arizona. So who will get the nod, you think, for the opening game?
I think it's going to be Cade Fortin. I'm a lot more sure about that. I'm a lot more sure about who was going to start week one this year as opposed to who I thought was going to start week one last year. I think Cade Fortin knows the offense inside and out. He spent a lot of time studying that. Travis Marsh, the now redshirt freshman, got to play a few games last year, and I think he could be really good down the line. I think Cade really took a lot of time over the offseason, took a lot of time over the spring, and really got a chance to learn the offense inside and out. And I think he's going to be the guy to go to. He's been practicing with the ones. He led the breakout on the first day of practice. That media got a chance to see last week. He was with the ones today. And, I really think he's been a true leader. A lot of folks have been impressed with his leadership abilities during the off season. Working some player-led practices, he was one of the leading voices in that. I think he's got more trust with a lot of the receivers that have been there for years. Guys like Xavier Weaver, guys like Latrell Williams, guys that he's been around now for a season and a half. And I think he was one of those guys that really just never got a chance to get rolling and never really got a good chance to do much last season because of the fact that he was hurt for a good part of the year with some sort of shoulder injury. So, I think Cade's definitely the favorite at the moment. There's three guys behind him in Jaron Williams, the former Miami quarterback, Travis Marsh, as I mentioned, and Timmy McClain, a true freshman from Stanford Seminole. And Jeff Scott said today that he firmly believes that there's more than one guy that they feel that they could go and win with, which they didn't feel confident this time last year that they had more than one guy that they could win with, which was pretty striking, telling the talent that they thought they had in that quarterback room. I think it's a situation that has stabilized itself slightly. It's obviously still got a ways to go. Still 20 some odd days until USF heads up to NC State to take on a Wolfpack. But I do think Cade Fortin will be the guy when they step out at Carter Finney Stadium up there.
Yeah, and of course you mentioned Weaver and Williams as far as receivers go, and then of course in the running game, Johnny Ford has left for Florida Atlantic. So at least Kelly Joyner, Brian Petit how do you see the running game evolving?
Yeah, so what they did this year in terms of recruiting transfers is they really looked for a bigger back. USF hasn't had a back above 6 feet since that contributed mightily since Jordan Cronkrite back in 19. So they really went out. They tried to get themselves a big back over 6 feet. They got that in Jaron Mangum, who's a junior transfer out of Colorado or from Colorado. Had a pretty solid freshman season out there. In his debut year, he's 6'2", 215. I think he's going to be a staple, especially in short yardage situations. I also think Darian Felix, the former Oregon transfer, is going to have a pretty large role in the offense. Last year, he had a hamstring injury that he just was never really able to get over. Obviously, hamstrings are one of those types of injuries that you don't want to rush because that can linger with you for the rest of your playing career. So they really eased him in and really eased him into play. They tried to get him in against UCF towards the end of the year. They just weren't able. He just wasn't really feeling that he was able to go. But I think he's going to be a guy that could really make a run towards that starting position. And then obviously you got a guy like Kelly Joyner Jr. who came in as a freshman and really played well. Finished second on the team last year or 2 years ago. Led the team in rushing last year. And even a guy like Brian Bassey really came on strong as a true freshman. And played well. He's kind of been almost forgotten. I don't know if forgotten is the right word, but hasn't been really mentioned this much this spring, but still is a guy that could be dangerous as a sophomore this year. And then K'Wan Powell, a true freshman out of Vernon High School, played 1A ball, averaged like 24 yards to carry his senior year of high school. Kind of a stat back type that's now up over 200 pounds. He was 190. He's over 200 now. 5'9", a guy that's really been talked about highly this year. I think he had some pretty significant offers, if I remember correctly. I think Florida State, LSU, and maybe Washington State was on his offer list at some point. So he was pretty highly recruited back out of high school, and a guy that I think could push the needle at that position. So I think the running game should be a lot better than it was last season. Not that it was bad at times last season, but I think it should be more consistent.
And as we all know, everything starts in the trenches and the offensive line. If I'm correct, all 5 starters are returning, and they've got good size in that line. So with a year under their belt, that should be an area of continued improvement for the offense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you are correct. All 5 guys returned. With Donovan Jennings at left tackle, Demetrius Harris at left guard, Donovan Jennings at left tackle, Harris at left guard, Brad Cecil at center, Michael Wiggs at right guard, and Jarrett Hopple / DeMontre Jacobs at right tackle. They kind of split time toward the end of the year. DeMontre Jacobs is a guy that came in from Grambling at 6'6", 305 that they really liked, and has been talked about pretty highly this spring as well. That again could be a guy that pushes the needle. And then beyond that, I mean, there's some guys that Dustin Hall came in and played those first 2 games of the season when guys were out on the unavailable list and played against Notre Dame and got some good experience there. So I think Dustin Hall could be a guy down the line. I think Andrew Kilfoyle, true freshman out of Gaker High School in Tampa, could be really good down the line. Cesar Reyes, a sophomore from Tampa that I think could be really good down the line. The biggest thing with that offensive line is it's so striking to me because just 2 years ago they were one of the worst offensive line units in the country in terms of allowing sacks, and Alan Mogridge did a phenomenal job in 2020 developing that unit, whether it was those first team guys or if those guys were out, getting a guy like Dustin Hall or DeMontre Jacobs when he became eligible to really be able to hold the line a little bit and be able to get some good time. And I think that unit should be good again. I mean, when you return the type of talent that you return, especially the leadership that you return between, that left side of the line, play together as freshmen and sophomores, right? Brad Cecil started midway through the season against East Carolina in that 2018 year, I believe, and Donovan Jennings got some run early in his freshman season. Same with Demetrius Harris. So those guys have got a lot of games under their belt. And Michael Wiggs, is a guy that moved from center to right guard, that really looked a lot better at right guard, that decided to come back for another year. Same with Jarrett Hopple at right tackle. There's a lot of games and a lot of experience on that line, and I think Alan Mogridge, who took over as offensive line coach, was stopped at FIU in North Carolina, and I believe Georgia Southern as well, has really turned that unit into something that fans can look forward to, and I think there's a lot of good things along that offensive line, which is something that you couldn't really say 2 years ago, which is great to see the development and the improvement.
Yeah, and that's definitely where you want to start your building in turning things around. Now, as far as the defense goes, it was tough on that side of the ball. They allowed 440 yards and 40 points per game, and a lot of that, I think, was a big lack of a pass rush. Who will they look to try to get improvement in that area on the D line?
Yeah, so my position of concern coming into the season is the defensive line and that pass rush. They run a 3-4 under Glenn Spencer, so there's 3 down linemen every single snap, which in itself can create some concern, especially if you don't have a takeover defensive lineman that can really just play out of his mind, So, they're a little small up front, but that's something that they've really tried to hammer home this season in strength and conditioning. That was probably one of their main points of emphasis, was getting that defensive line ready. They returned 4 senior defensive tackles in Kevin Kegler, Kelvin Pinckney, Blake Green, and Thad Mangum. And there's some guys on that in that D tackle room. It wasn't that long ago where Kevin Kegler was posting 36 tackles at the D tackle spot and 7.5 tackles for loss. It wasn't that long ago that he was doing that, and the potential is there, especially with a guy like Kegler. He's just got to stay healthy. We got confirmed today that he's still not at 100%. He had a broken hand in 2019 and missed the last 2 games of last season with an injury. If I'm correct, it was a back injury, but I'm not entirely 100% sure what it was. Blake Green has been solid at the D tackle spot. Thad Mangum really, the transfer from Wofford, really, really shined in his first year at the FBS level, and a guy that became a leader. Led defensive tackles, and I remember right, he probably led all defensive linemen in tackles and tackles for loss. So, that's the defensive tackle spot. The end, the end spot is kind of, we'll have to kind of see how that goes. Tremel Logan, who's a redshirt freshman, or maybe a true sophomore. I'm not sure how they're doing things with this NCAA stuff and how they're classifying the guys these days. It seems like it's a different class every week, but Tremel Logan's a guy that they're really trying to call on. He won a state championship his last year at Booker T. Washington out of Miami. He's one that could be solid. He's just got to get more weight on him. Came in at 6'2", 230. Played a little bit at the end of last season. He's going to be one that they rely on a lot. Jamari Stewart, they brought in from Mississippi State, ended up not playing for Mississippi State last year before he transferred. They brought him in right before the early signing period. And, you still got some guys on that line like Tyrone Barber. I think Rayshawn Yates is going to have another fantastic year. He's kind of been a mix between a D end and a D tackle, and started all 9 games last year. I think he's probably one of the most underrated players on the roster in terms of what he brings week in and week out, and he's got enough quick twitch to be able to play as an end, but is big enough to be able to play as a D tackle too. So there's some guys that really could stand out. Darian Grant's been around a long time on this roster, just really hasn't been able to put it all together, but is a guy that very well could. There's guys that could really make an impact, but it's a lot of wait and see and see who's going to step up along that D line this year.
They do have help behind them, the linebacking core, which has a lot of speed with Antonio Greer, Dwayne Bowles. They were the top 2 tacklers last season, so there is a positive there as they have a good linebacking core.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably, outside of maybe the running back room, is their linebacking core is definitely the strongest defensive unit, without a doubt. Dwayne Boyles and Antonio Greer have been phenomenal and have been guys that you can rely on, whether it's dropping back into coverage or tracking a running back out of the backfield or coming up to make a sack, or those guys find holes through the offensive line and always seem to make plays. Andrew Mims is another guy that's right along with them that was a walk-on, really didn't get as much attention as Greer and Boyles do, but Andrew Mims has been right up there with Boyles and Greer, maybe not as high tackling numbers, but was 4th on the team last year with 38. Pretty much played, I think, nearly every game. He's the guy that has played with a chip on his shoulder quite a while. As a walk-on and has earned pretty much everything he's got, and has been fantastic. And then you look behind those guys, Mac Harris got some run kind of in that Cincinnati game and came on against the Citadel early in the year as a true freshman. He was coming down. He's a converted safety, but was big enough to play linebacker, and they like what he's bringing. I think Brian Norris is going to be one too that you might not realize. He's a converted running back, actually. And a guy that has been talked about really highly by Antonio Greer. Actually, was gushing about him the other day in a press conference. And Brian Norris is the junior that's been around, has again developed quickly as a linebacker. Played primarily special teams in the beginning of his career, and switched over, made the switch to linebacker. I want to say before the 19th season, and really kind of took it by storm and really took the opportunity and got a chance to grow. And I think he'll be solid this year too. So, I think that linebacker room is, when you look at it holistically, is probably the best on the team in terms of just a whole room. And especially now that you've got Ernie Sims leading that group as the position coach, right? Former All-American at Florida State, and a guy that had a chance to go back to Florida State and take a job on Mike Norvell's staff this offseason, that decided to stay in Tampa, take the position of linebacker coach, moving Glenn Spencer as the defensive coordinator up to safeties, and I think he's solid. I think Ernie Sims is going to do a great job with the linebacking core. He did solid as an assistant last year, and I'm really intrigued to see how that group continues to develop, and how some of those guys individually, like a Brian Norris or Mac Harris, grow into deeper roles as Greer and Boyles kind of head toward graduation.
The secondary, they gave away a lot of big plays, but they also came up with a lot of picks. But it is a group in flux. They've had some departures. What is your viewpoint of that position group?
Yeah, so with KJ Sales and Mike Hansen leaving to go to go explore their pro opportunities, those were your two senior cornerbacks on the outside that really kind of locked the team down defensively. A lot of people don't remember that this 2 years ago, 2019, they were a top 20 group in the country in terms of passing yards against. They kind of took a step back last season, but you could really attribute that more to depth, I think, just because there were a lot of guys out with COVID issues. I mean, they started the year with 9 scholarship corners, and they ended the year against UCF with 2 available. So, they played that Houston game with 2. So, when you look at the talent there, I think there's guys that stand out. Christian Williams, Will Jones, and who's the third? Matt Hill have transferred in, all from Power 5 programs. Hill's from Auburn, Williams from Miami, and Will Jones from Kansas State. Those guys have been talked about quite a bit over this off season. I think they could be solid. It sounds like they're all gonna play safety. Williams with the cornerback coming out of high school, so kind of the only one in flux. Those guys got talked about a lot. Had a solid spring, and then T.J. Robinson, who's a transfer from Rutgers, as a redshirt sophomore, ended up missing last season because of NCAA transfer rules. He has been, you want to talk about a guy that's been talked about literally more than anybody else. It's T.J. Robinson. It doesn't matter if you're talking to Glenn Spencer, Jeff Scott, a fellow mate in the secondary. T.J. Robinson has been talked about just a lot, and sounds like he's competing for a starting spot at the cornerback position. Ironically enough, I actually went to high school with TJ at Riverview down in Tampa, and he's always been a fantastic athlete. He always kind of stood out on the field with his play. Was kind of better than everybody else by a long shot in high school, and he's kind of starting to do that in college a little bit. I think he could be really special. Daquan Evans had that remarkable string of games last year with I think 4 or 5 interceptions in a row or something of that nature. 4 or 5 games with a pick, or excuse me, it was actually 3. But still played really, really well for 4 games, and really was solid in his sophomore season when Hampton went down with injury and Sales went down with injury late in the year. So, I think Chris Townsend too, another guy out of that class from freshman class from last year, could be solid again. He played some safety. He had a pick against Cincinnati. Jaden Curry's been talked about a little bit this spring. So there's without a doubt there's some guys there. I think that again that unit should probably take a step forward just on depth alone, because of the fact that they should be playing with a full deck of cards, as they didn't last year because they barely had anybody that was healthy and ready to go. So I think that's going to be huge for them, is just being able to have a full slate of guys, a full slate of scholarship guys, and be able to just rotate in and out. Because you looked at towards the end of last season. These guys were not only playing every rep of the game, they're playing every rep in practice. And after a while, that really runs you down, especially as a corner or a safety, when you got a guy on the outside on a go route that's running 60 yards down the field, and you got to do that not once, not twice, not three times, but you got to do that. You got to do that over and over and over again, right? So I think just on depth alone, they're going to be a lot. They should be significantly better, especially than the end of last season. Just having guys back in the rotation and being able to contribute again.
Yeah, having fresh legs will be important, that's for sure. So as Jeff Scott enters year number 2, and I guess in some ways, it was going to be a difficult campaign, COVID or not, but due to those circumstances, it's kind of like a free year so to speak, as far as building that turnaround goes. What are you seeing in Jeff Scott and as far as the changes he's making in the culture?
Yeah, so, it's so hard with COVID to really kind of, I don't know if evaluate's the right term, but just to be able to establish the culture, and be able to, have guys have your entire team in a locker room at one time, or, on a practice day, or, be able to have full meetings, or be able to do all these different things that they didn't get a chance to do last year. It was difficult because, you have your capacity restrictions, you have passing restrictions, and all this other stuff that they just didn't get a chance to meet. I think Daquan Evans, if I remember right, said I barely knew anybody. Not just like knew them as football players, but he barely knew them as people because he barely got a chance to meet with anybody outside of their position. They never got a chance to mingle and really kind of get to know each other as a team. So I think that's big in itself. Obviously, USF just unveiled a brand new locker room, a brand new players lounge at the Leroy Selman Athletic Center. Got to tour that. It's a really nice facility and one that the guys are really fired up about. And just having even just minuscule things like having 2 Xboxes and 2 PlayStations, to be able to play games, having a pool table, having a ping pong table, just stuff like that, to be able to just kind of chill out and get to hang out, get to do things. And position groups were able to go to their respective coach's house and hang out and have a barbecue or have a pool day or, something of that nature. So, when you look at that in itself, there's a lot more camaraderie, a lot more of a deeper bond between them already. And even down to little things. The player-led practices were really big this offseason. A lot of good things were said about that. A lot of people were happy with the way those went. And, Brad Cecil, one of the leaders on this team, on that team with the Bull Council, which is a group of 12 leaders that Jeff Scott appointed, 12 player leaders, to talk with and kind of see where they feel the direction of the program is going from a player standpoint. He said it's been cool to see as one of those leaders to watch guys that, he even said something as minuscule as just being able to watch a guy that picks up a piece of trash that isn't his on the ground just to keep the locker room nice or to keep, the training field nice. Just the little things, stuff that they didn't do under Charlie Strong and stuff that they might not have even done last year. It's been and as Brad said, it's been a complete U-turn in terms of the culture so far, and it's cool to see. But at the same time, culture only takes you so far, right? The team was 1-8 last year. They didn't win a game against an FBS opponent, so it's one of those things where culture's great, but now you got to win some ball games, and now you got to prove to the fans that culture, that the changes on the culture are starting to translate to the field and to being able to, just being able to play again and being able to play at a high level and compete and win some games and be in some games late. And it's time for that culture stuff to translate to that.
Well, of course, it is nice to have new things, but as you said, it does come down to wins and losses. So if you're setting the line in Las Vegas, what does Will Turner say the win total is for USF this year?
Yeah, so I think my ceiling is probably 6-6. I think my floor is probably 3-9. So I'd probably say, if I were to set a line, I'd probably say at 4.5 or 3.5, 3.5 or 4.5. You've got an NC State team that I don't think is getting enough love. Around the country that could be good. You got to go up there week 1 on a Thursday night. You welcome Florida the next week. I mean, it doesn't get easier. You welcome Dan Mullen and that crew, and that'll be a 70,000 sold-out game at Raymond James Stadium that you got to try and win in. That might not be all USF fans. So, you're imagining your game after that against Florida A&M as a gimme. BYU is kind of a wild card right now after losing Zach Wilson. Still kind of tough to tell what that team's going to look like, especially since they have a quarterback situation ongoing as well. SMU is tough. Tulsa's tough. Temple is kind of right along USF in terms of a rebuild. East Carolina and Houston I could easily see going either way, which is kind of where that variable, 3 to 4 to 6 kind of opts in. And even a team like Tulane, but it'd be cool it would be cool, to see an upset against an NC State or a Florida or a Cincinnati, a UCF type, or BYU. I think in order to make a bowl game this year, USF is going to have to do just that. I mean, you've got some, you welcome Cincinnati, which is nice, and you welcome Tulsa, which is nice, but you got to go on the road and play it at UCF, and you got to go on the road and play it at SMU, which are, and you got to go play on the road at East Carolina, places that aren't, necessarily easy to play at. So, you look at it, and I think 6 wins is probably the ceiling, 3 wins the floor, and but there's a lot of variables that can happen. So, kind of where I'm at with.
All right. Well, Will, before we let you run, please drop some shameless plugs for your coverage of USF.
Yeah, absolutely. So my personal Twitter is at WTurner247. The site Twitter is at Bulls247. You can check out all the latest news regarding USF at Bulls247.com. We're currently running a countdown of the 25 most important players for the 2021 season. Currently right now, so that's kind of the big thing that we're doing on the site now. 23 odd days away from Thursday night at NC State, and we'll have tons more preview content on the way. And yeah, so hopefully it'll be a good year. It'll be my 4th on the beat, which is wild because I didn't realize it was that long. But yeah, so kind of how we're doing it.
Yeah, you're a grizzled veteran now.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm sitting there at fall camp going, dang, man, it's already been 4 years.
Well, there you go. Well, Will, you do an outstanding job, and as always, we appreciate you joining the program today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, Steph.
And that'll wrap things up for this week's show. As always, we thank you for listening, and you can follow me on Twitter at JeffAllen_88 and follow the Nightline Sports Network at UCF_Nightline. This has been the AAC Report, only on the Nightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Thanks for listening.